Ahoy, everyone. Welcome back to the Wyatt Claypool Show. So, Canadian politics is very crazy right now. We have the Liberal Party leadership race wrapping up on March 9th here. US President Donald Trump has re-announced that he will be placing the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico effective immediately. Our politicians are announcing counter tariffs. It's all very stupid. Really, we should just be lowering taxes and regulations in this country because that is our main economic problem. It is not the tariffs. The tariffs are bad, but placing tariffs of our own on US imports means that Canadians are just paying even more taxes than they already do. But that is a different topic for a different day. Today, I want to talk about former Prime Minister Stephen Harper finally having to come out and slam Liberal leadership frontrunner Mark Carney. Mark Carney has a very touch and go relationship with the truth. The funny thing is that usually when you think of somebody who's like a pathological liar, they're at least interesting, like they're eccentric, they constantly say things that aren't true because they're a little bit crazy. Mark Carney is the most boring man you've ever seen in your entire life, and he can't keep the truth straight. It's the worst of both worlds for him. He is both not compelling and deeply embarrassing for the Liberal Party. And now Stephen Harper has come out and said that Carney's basically been stealing credit for the 2008 market crisis since he left as the governor of the Bank of Canada. The governor of the Bank of Canada doesn't actually do as much as you would think. They keep monetary policy steady. They basically coordinate with the government to make sure that the amount of money being printed, the interest rates are in line with what the government is attempting to do. They just follow orders. They are basically somebody who shovels coal into the engine whenever the prime minister and the finance minister say so. And that is the point that Harper had to come out and make, that Carney has basically no involvement in any of this, that he was just basically being told what to do, he implemented it, and now he's pretending that he's Napoleon. Anyways, before I get into what Harper exactly said, guys, just a reminder to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that great stuff. It helps the channel grow. Thanks for everyone coming and saying hi to me when I was at the BC Conservative AGM. Maybe I'll talk about the AGM a little bit later in this video. Was fairly unimpressed with certain things that had gone on. But anyways, let's move forward into what Stephen Harper said. So, in this report from the Globe and Mail that I will be linking in the description of this video below, says, but in the fundraiser letter, Mr. Harper said Carney was not involved in the day-to-day management of Canada's economy during that time. Quote, I have listened with increasing disbelief to Mark Carney's attempt to take credit for the things he had little or nothing to do with back then, he said. He has been doing this at the great expense of the late Jim Flaherty, among the greatest finance ministers in Canadian history. Mr. Harper wrote, "Let me be clear. The hard calls during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis were made by Jim. Mr. Carney said Mr. Harper offered him the finance minister post in 2012. The former prime minister did not say anything in his letter about that assertion. Mr. Harper's consulting firm did not immediately return a request for clarification on Monday. So we will be seeing if that was a real offer made to Carney, but let's be clear, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he thought that he would be a good finance minister. Maybe he should run for the Conservative Party. If Harper said that, if anything, that just proves that Harper sometimes makes bad calls. But you'll notice that Harper's not saying that was all me. I would say that Harper could actually take a lot of credit. You're the prime minister. You're the one who's actually approving the calls that your ministers are making. But Harper doesn't do that. He actually says it's Jim Flaherty, who died a few years ago, who was the one who was making the calls. So what Mark Carney's doing is fairly disgusting in stealing credit away from a dead man because, well, he's not alive to say that it was actually him making these calls. And again, it's obvious he wasn't the one making the calls. He is the governor of the Bank of Canada. He just implements. He's like a deputy minister. Deputy ministers don't do anything but implement the policies that the minister wants to do. Yes, they do some of the technical work, but it's basically whatever the policy calls for them to do. And actually, the governor of the Bank of Canada is even more simplistic. we want to engage in a certain amount of quantitative easing. Can you increase interest rates up to this level? Can you print this much money? Can you do this? Can you make these like little changes? It's all very like standardized. But let's move on to another story where Mark Carney is having trouble figuring out what the truth is. And in this case, it's such a weird one. I feel like the normal layman in Canada, the person who doesn't know anything about politics, doesn't even vote, would probably know that this isn't right. So this is another moment from this other meeting that Mark Carney was at, where he had previously claimed in another lie that he has experience dealing with Donald Trump, not dealing with people like Trump, but he has personally dealt with Donald Trump, which is completely false. He's never brought it up until that meeting in front of a small crowd of people. So it's clearly not actually true. If he had dealt with Trump and beat Trump on something, do you think he wouldn't make that like the centerpiece of his entire campaign? Chrystia Freeland was not a very good negotiator during the USMCA NAFTA renegotiations, and she still ballyhoos that as a great life achievement. You think Mark Carney, if he actually bested Trump in something, wouldn't be talking about that in his sleep even? He would be doing it all the time. But here's another one where he is claiming that the US gets most of its semiconductors from Canada.
Biggest supplier of fertilizer, biggest supplier of aluminum, biggest supplier of semiconductors. We supply almost all their semiconductors. That whole, everybody in the White House is a tech bro except for Trump. They all need semiconductors. They all come from Canada.
You can even tell he's lying because he's first talking about aluminum, and he's talking about fertilizer. That makes sense. I actually assume he's probably right on those. We are like, Saskatchewan itself is like the world's biggest provider of like canola oil. We do a lot of those kind of mineral products, things that require like mining, different sorts of like chemicals and whatnot. We supply a lot of those kind of raw material type products into the US. But semiconductors, suddenly he says, we supply the most semiconductors. And you can tell he knows it's a lie because he starts filling in more information than he needed to. Because if it was true, he could have said, we supply the most semiconductors, we supply the most this. He slows down and he starts adding like nonsense detail to the lie. There's a lot of tech bros in the White House. They can't operate without semiconductors. Everyone knows most of the semiconductors, and especially most of the like more complex semiconductors, come from Taiwan. They'll come from Vietnam, China, Asia. They're not coming from Canada. Do you know how many? I'll let this play for a little bit longer. Then we'll go back to how many semiconductors, what percentage of the US's semiconductors come from Canada?
Maybe they won't. Maybe one day they won't show up. We'll see. We'll see what they're biggest.
And it's funny, all these people like chortling to themselves, like, oh yes, they'll be very upset not to get the semiconductors from Canada. They're going to be, completely beside themselves because obviously Mark Carney has just said that we are the world's biggest semiconductor supplier, and they're not going to get them now. We supply 0.8% of the semiconductors that the U.S. Imports every year. Yeah, we don't provide anything. That was stupid. He knows it's stupid, and he's already had to walk back this comment saying, "Well, I got it wrong. I just misspoke." I just want to look up what his excuse is here. So I'm just bringing up. You don't need to see it. You don't need to see the article. I'm just bringing up from the Toronto Sun. If I can get it here. Okay, here it is. This is what his spokesperson said for the campaign. In a statement sent to the Toronto Sun by a campaign spokesman and for the Carney team, claimed he only meant to emphasize Canada's role in the North American semiconductor supply chain. Quote, his remarks underscored the need for Canada to leverage its strength in the critical minerals, advanced manufacturing, and R&D, research and development, to further bolster North American semiconductor security and competitiveness. That is a nothing statement. That is the most campaign staffer statement I've ever read in my life, where he couldn't even justify that most of our minerals, or we are supplying the raw materials needed to make the semiconductors. We're not. We probably really aren't. I really doubt if we supply a substantial amount to that sector. If you know how big semiconductors are, this is not like we're supplying the raw materials of like steel and aluminum and other tough metals to make ships. We're like sending in like microscopic amounts of like gold and other things to make very small microchips and semiconductor. No, that's just wrong. Oh, we could be, and the whole statement's like, we could have a significant role in improving the future competitiveness and strength in the semiconductor supply chain industry. It's like, shut up. Just go take a walk. Just say nothing about this story. My goodness. It's like I'm the guy here who usually wants people to stand for like, truth and honesty in politics. I am begging the Carney people, just lie better. Just do a little bit of a better lie. It's so much easier. You could have just lied. You could have lied. And I'm almost endorsing them to lie because at least that would be smarter politics. But good thing for the Conservatives that, frankly, he has like the absolute worst campaign I've ever seen. Is he going to win the Liberal leadership race? Probably, just because he has Team Trudeau behind him and there's just so much artificial momentum for him. Does he deserve to win? Oh my goodness, no. I don't think anyone in this race deserves to win. There's this one thing I want to highlight from the account Marty up north from Alberta. Marty's a great guy. And I found this kind of striking about the Liberal leadership race. Look at this. Holy yes, the final numbers of eligible voters might be less than 100,000. This is for the Liberal leadership race. Given that the winners will be whoever gets 50% of the votes plus one, it's possible that we'll have a prime minister chosen by less than 50,000 people. That's insane. And what Marty is commenting on is he says, all this week, Liberal Party members who meet a strict eligibility criteria will be voting for the next Prime Minister of Canada. By all accounts, that's less than 250,000 people. Let that sink in. A mere 1% of Canada's population will pick our next leader, and there's nothing we can do about it. Democracy is dead. It's actually far less than that, far less than 1%, because there are 400,000 people who are eligible to vote in the Liberal Party leadership race, but you have to go through this sort of like eligibility test. And so that's whittled things down to up until yesterday, only 97,000 people were eligible to vote. I believe you vote online. It's not by mail like I had previously assumed. Maybe some people are waiting. Maybe you're going to see a big spike of it. But based on how long voting's been open so far, it's been open for like 5 days or so, 7 days. And only less than 100,000, less than a quarter of eligible voters have actually sent in who they're voting for. I don't even think they've sent in who they're voting for. 97,000 people have become eligible of the 400,000 to vote. So Marty's right. Let 250,000 people might choose who the next prime minister is, which means that whoever has 125,001 votes could become the prime minister for a few weeks until hopefully Pierre Poilievre ends up becoming the prime minister and installs a conservative government. Like, that is absolutely pathetic. This is also why I think there actually kind of is a chance that he could lose, that Mark Carney could lose the Liberal leadership, because he's run such an oddly incompetent campaign. I could see Chrystia Freeland coming up from the middle, all these people seeing his gas, all of his lying, and they're like, ugh, between, the boring man and the boring woman, maybe we'll take the boring woman because she comes with a little bit less baggage. But yeah, anyways, that's it for those topics. I just want to quickly do a miniature talk about the BC Conservative AGM. So I went to the BC Conservative AGM in Nanaimo. Oddly enough, I was actually never invited by anyone. I just knew if I showed up, no one was going to say no for me walking in and getting a media pass. And I'm going to have to do maybe a report on this later or talk about this later. I'm just going to say blanketly, I found it deeply inappropriate that after they did the board vote and everything, that the BC Conservative team put out this really stupid tone-deaf graphic saying Team John Rustad won because they had a slate that John apparently had endorsed, and they won. They won 55% of the vote for some of the positions. Who did you beat? What are you talking about? Who did you beat at your own AGM? They in fact beat the grassroots long-term Conservative membership, by the way. And by the way, they were not the ones bussing people in, the grassroots members. It was John's people who bussed people in, by the way. And so did they actually win? I don't know, but that will have to be talked about a little bit later. I like John. I really do like John Rustad. He has some people around him who are giving him what I would be considering awful advice, who are basically liberals who don't want to give up any power because these are the best jobs they've ever had in their lives. And so they will never leave the positions that they're in right now and are willing to do, in my mind, shady things. In fact, one of them intimidated me for trying to take a photo of the people lining up at the back of the room who had basically only showed up an hour before, voted for the board election, shoved the new constitution through, then left. Little weird, little weird. But I'll be talking about that more in the coming days because, hey, I don't work for them. I can do whatever I want. And so that's it for there. If you're in BC, I would be a little bit wanting some questions, especially when they're putting out graphics, basically talking proudly that they had defeated their own grassroots membership. Guys, you're on notice. A little bit on notice right now. Anyways, so I'll talk to you guys all later. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all that stuff. And I will be back in another video, probably talking about the tariffs.